Hello, everyone. My name's Bailey.
I'm Brandon.
So, Brandon, you and I have been asked to have a conversation about how we can encourage one another. It's a set of conversations that are being recorded in our congregation about on the one another's. And so I'm excited to have that conversation with you. I know in our preparation that even as we've practiced and warmed up, right. It's been uplifting in itself.
True.
So our theme is literally the word encourage,
Right.
or exhort or admonish. That occurs many times in the New Testament in many different contexts. But particularly we've been asked to look at how that word is also coupled, the verses where it's coupled with one another, encourage one another. And it turns out that's only a few times, maybe 7, 8 times in the New Testament when those two things occur together, those two words occur together. And that's an interesting focus on itself, because, as you know, we looked up the definition through Strong's. The word admonish or encourage, that parakleo word, it seems to have that first definition of come along with me, or to call someone to come with you, or join me in this, or let's do this together. It has that kind of sense of in its initial root. And I liked that. And so when you add that to one another, it almost gives it even more of the emphasis of doing something together. And that in itself is the way we give each other courage or exhort. It's not so much an instruction as it is a call. Please come along with me and do this. That kind of a call. Hey, would you join me in something? Join me in a game of basketball, or join me in this cause to adopt, parentless children. Join me in this cause to live well, to live right, to live lovingly, and not join a fight. Right? Join me in this cause. Is that sense of that word, encourage? What do you think in terms of encourage and encourage one another, and that coupling of words?
Yeah, I think with encourage, it's more of when you hear encouraging someone, it is more of maybe encouraging them to do better in a sport or do better in school. But I think when you add the one another, it does make it feel more of something that you're invested in, that it's a team effort, that I'm going to help you because I know you're going to help me. And we're both wanting the same end goal to get to the same place.
Right, right. It has that kind of like we think of teams. It has that kind of teamwork or underlying character, right?
Right. Whereas the encourage just by itself more of a one direction versus something that's a reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. So as part of why we're having this discussion, one of the challenges we'll be talking about is how do you have that sense of maintaining that character of the instructions we have to encourage one another, admonish one another. How can we maintain that character in our current conditions because of COVID-19?
Right.
When the conditions push us more towards separation and distancing than it does being together physically. How do we do that is part of what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So in those 7 or 8 verses, we decided to look particularly at Hebrews. There are 2 places it occurs in Hebrews chapter 3 and Hebrews chapter 10, where these 2 words come together. And Hebrews seems to have maybe a context that we can relate to a bit, in that it seems to be written for a Jewish audience named Hebrews, a Jewish audience of Christians in early Christianity, but perhaps not in the earliest years. It could be in some of the later years, 50 plus years after the start of Christianity and the start of the church in the book of Acts. It's perhaps some 50 years plus later, and so folks it's not as new anymore for some folks potentially, and because of the message in Hebrews, that it's obviously a Jewish audience because of the references that are used in Hebrews, and it's also has this message of not giving up, of persevering, not being complacent. Maybe it's a context of the newness is wearing off, and now that it's wearing off, have I really made the right decision? Am I still really in the right place? Is this, this is brand new? Maybe even, is Jesus really the Christ, right? Is it some of those thoughts could possibly be the case of the context? And there's also a context, it seems, that we know as soon after the beginning of Christianity, there was growing persecution, that it eventually led to some martyrdoms, and years later. But there's this growing persecution so there may be some societal pressures too, and people may be wondering, should I stick with it, so to speak, right?
The trials are
the trials. Mm-hmm. So that's the context. Any comments you might add to that about the context?
I would just think, looking like you had mentioned with COVID, I think it's a good kind of way to put ourselves in it, because, the outside pressures and how we're used to, the first day of the week and church services and all of those things changing, that some people, their normal routine or how they see the world or things have changed. And so they're probably in that same concern, are they on unstable ground, as far as their faith, and things a little rocky because of outside, dynamics, or
there seems to be more outside pressures
right.
than at least when I was young, to be more open about Christianity and Christian practices, and there's more pressures about how that's ignorant or old-fashioned or narrow. There seem to be more pressures in our society, kind of coupled with this COVID-19 issue. And we certainly don't know about what the context completely of Hebrews, but there may be some relation to to some of those kind of pressures. Well, I'll read the first verse, and then we'll comment to each other about the first verse in Hebrews, and then we can talk about the second one.
Okay.
So Hebrews 3:13 simply says, "But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin." This verse is in the middle of a section of verses, which is a reference to Moses and a call upon how that when they were leaving Egypt and the Lord was leading them out of Egypt, not too soon after they got out, they fell to the test that they were under, and resorted back to fleshly or vain or evil ways, and developed hardened hearts, and so much so that Moses, eventually the Lord said through Moses, you're going to roam through the desert for 40 years, and some of you won't go into the promised land. You won't make it to the rest, as it's called. It's called a rest. And that's the context of this verse. And so there's a few things that I'd say about that is somebody can get complacent, right? You and I can get complacent if we don't watch out. In fact, pride comes before the fall. We may actually, if we think we can't, maybe the first sign that we know we can, because we certainly can get complacent. Surely if believers that are getting rescued and cross the Red Sea and watch the military behind them, get drowned and get free, and then all of a sudden, it seems sudden, but sometime later they start to get complacent and hard-hearted. Who knows? You and I can, right?
Right.
In this situation, we can get that way. And so the instruction is, while you've had this chance, while it's still called today, while your heart's still listening, while you still have the opportunity, before it's over, however you want to say it, while it's still here and happening, we need to encourage each other to not get complacent. Any thoughts about that? Or?
No, the point that you made, I think it is interesting how we feel as a society, so busy and pressure to do all these things, then to be hit with COVID and the world kind of stopped, as they say, and to become complacent. It's a lot easier to see, and it's a little harder to picture if you had witnessed some of the things like you mentioned with the Red Sea, how if you could witness or been part of that to be complacent, then there's no doubt that in today's day and age it would be more than easy to let yourself fall to that.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but it's easier for me to move into complacency when I'm more on my own, right? Versus having that sense of being with other people. There's that sense of being with others that nudges me and also holds me accountable, both, right? That relationship. Whereas being more on my own, may be easier for me to become more complacent.
Well, and I think we've all, with the change in schedule, have done a lot more things on our own. So it's easier to think, I can do this solo, or, my family's doing, we're doing okay with this, and services online, we can look at those when we have time, or Sunday morning at 10 o'clock's not good. We're more of a, in between football games, maybe I'll squeeze it in still. So the flexibility, may counteract the availability of time. It's still easy now with having, not being able to go to service, or during, the first part of COVID, not being able to go to service, to just feel like you can squeeze it in because it's just online. So you don't have the set time, and knowing that you're going to see, fellow brothers and sisters.
It's almost the added freedom also, in a way, is kind of a test for you and I, just how important it is. Because now we can almost choose when we can choose when to watch it, and think that we've gotten that done. Alfie, so then is there a delivery man outside? Yes. Alfie, it's all right, buddy. Okay. One of the aspects in Hebrews, and also is indicated in chapter 3, and it's indicated more strongly in chapter 6, and also at the end of the book, is that you have today, but you don't always have today. There is the opportunity that will pass. It's not that it might pass, or that, don't worry about it, you've got all the time in the world. That's not the point of the book. The point of the message is, and it gives some examples, including this one, is that you have now, but there comes a time you might not have now anymore. And that now might be because you've gotten so hard-hearted that you just don't hear it anymore, and you've become too hard-hearted and you're turned away. And that now also can be, there's a time when it just ends.
Right. And
there's some examples that demonstrate that once it's ended, right? It's over. And even when you beg and plead that you wish you had more time, it's still over. It's done. It's over. And that's a really rather stark message, kind of a wake-up call message that, for me, kind of goes along with complacency. Because if I think I've got all the time in the world, then I might play. If you know what I mean by play. I'll play along for a while, but then I'll grow up and I'll get better. Or I'll be more dedicated later. But right now, I just kind of play. I'll just kind of walk the line and just play a little while, but not be all in it. And that may actually be on the teeter of becoming hard-hearted and taking advantage of the grace of God.
Right.
And taking advantage of the day I have today. It's not a very loving approach. It's more of a selfish approach to play. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Or?
I think that is, it's probably, from an outsider to see, warning signs or things that may be pushing towards a hardened heart. But the person who's the actual person in the moment, so to speak, or the person that's actually, kind of walking a thin line there, it would be very tough for them to see it, because they've rationalized or found maybe other friends or other influences that have justified this, need to kind of play both sides or skirt, obligations or responsibilities.
Right.
And so they don't see it because they're getting that affirmation from others that, oh, it's fine, or, it's more of a worldly behavior. And so it can easily, get out of control, or, like you said, we don't know when that day, or,
when does it flip over, right? When does it move into the direction that I'm now hard-hearted, right? Some analogy I might think about that is, nobody ever decides to become an alcoholic.
Right.
No one ever that I've ever related to or encouraged or reached out to and wished they weren't. It wasn't like they ever said and decided, well, I'm just going to be addicted, and my body's now going to be addicted. But then all of a sudden it happened, right?
Right.
And how do you know when that happens? I don't know. When does it start to happen? But there's somewhere it happened. And even in my own personal life, it might be okay for me to have a drink now and then. But then if I start to think in my mind, if I can't go a dinner out without a glass of wine, why do I feel that way? Why is that automatic?
Right.
Am I starting to get a hardened heart? If it doesn't even start to bother me and almost moves in the other direction, well, if I'm going to go out to eat nice, then I should get a glass of wine. If that's the automatic thought, I call that the automatic thought, then even my own mind or heart may be starting on that edge. That's my thought process of when do I start getting hard-hearted if it becomes too automatic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one thing, even when reading this, I found myself that when you hear hardened heart, a lot of times I even do it, like my first thought process is always emotion. You know, and when it talks about the heart, it's really, you know, the mind, the conscience. So you're not just making an emotional decision. It's not in the heat of the moment. I mean, it's stuff that has been rationalized, that you've thought about it, and like you said, it's without second guessing or like, why am I doing that? It's just something that you've already made that decision, and until something else, you know, I guess something makes you aware that you've made that decision, or unfortunately, you know, it progresses to where it becomes a problem in your face, making that conscious decision, you know, is automatic.
It's kind of scary.
Right.
I mean, that's a personal experience I've had in my younger life. When I got to feeling that way, I'm like, why is that so automatic? That started making me nervous. But anyway.
Well, and that's where, for me, that's where it is scary, because like I said, I found myself a lot of times when you hear the heart, you know, the hardened heart, and like I said before, you feel like it's just a raw emotion or something that's going to get you fired up at that one spot. But that it's not just that. It's, you know, where you've, you know, read or studied, you know, and have strong beliefs, and then just over time, you kind of tell yourself, well, that's not exactly what that meant, or not 100% in this context.
It's not 100%, or it's not black and white, or
a lot of gray starts to form.
And you know, as long as it's this and this, I'm okay. Right. But it's the automatic thought that I thought maybe that's where you and I need to be careful, or we as people need to be careful if it gets automatic, or like you said, if you start not having a conscience about it. Right. You want to read Hebrews 10?
Yeah. So it's Hebrews 10, and we're in 21 through 25. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who's promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching.
Thoughts about that?
I think there's a lot there for sure, because again, it talks about the day approaching. Let me go back to a few of it. But with the day approaching, so it is the call to action. And then I guess starting back at, you know, some of the things that we've talked about have been addressed with drawing near to God with a sincere heart. So obviously, you know, not having a softened heart, and what will help keep that heart soft is being close to God, to not let other things get in the way of that relationship. And obviously we did talk about it too, the guilty conscience and having bodies washed with pure water. So it's, you know, being a Christian, being baptized, being pure, you know, not having a clear conscience. So having direction and focus on what needs to be done, and obviously that helps, maintain that relationship with God, because the worldly factors aren't distracting or aren't, pulling you in different directions. And then let's see. And then one of the things is, how we consider we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. So I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with encouraging one another, going on this journey, that obviously our end goal is a place in heaven. So if we can all agree that that's our end goal, then we need to do the things through encouraging, through rebuking one another, to praying with one another, to sharing our sorrows, joys together, but having that type of relationship that we know that about one another, and therefore when one of us starts to fall or have those feelings that maybe this behavior is kind of okay for right now, that we can see that in one another, and that's where step in, encourage, and exhort one another to be better and to be an example, to be the light. And then, like I had already mentioned, is I think what you had talked about was see the day approaching. And obviously there's not a set, we're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah, and I don't know what that
reasons.
day is he's
Right.
talking about. Is it the
Right.
final day of judgment, or maybe it's the day it's too late for whatever reason, right?
Well, and I think that's, I totally agree, and that's what I was going to say is, it could be, when Christ comes back, it could be just the day I take my last breath here on earth. It could be the day that my heart hardens and I turn away from God. There's all of those are enough to, give you motivation, to have that close connection with God, with one another, knowing you need that to be close to God.
Right. It occurred to me just as you were talking and reading it just now, and remembering Elisha's message Sunday, spur one another to love and good works. Sometimes we get our zeal for what's good, right, and true sounds more like anger, and may come out more condescending, or disrespectful, or sarcastic, or fighting, right?
Right.
Because of our zeal for what's good, right, and true. But when it comes out that way, it's still just noise. It's still not really accomplishing. So I was actually just listening and imagining it for these Christians in this early time. That's probably some of what they need to hear. If they're being tested by the societal pressures and increasing momentum towards physical persecution eventually, right? If that's the pressures they're facing, you would tend to want to get angry. This isn't fair.
Right.
But the join me. Don't go down that path. Encouraging, right? Join me down the path of, despite what's going on, we're going to do love and good deeds. That's pretty challenging.
And that's one thing that I actually thought about, because I think when you first sent the outline, one of the bullet points was provoke one another to do something, or I think it was provoke to do good deeds. And it caught me off guard because provoke is never, well, I shouldn't say never, it's seldom used
Positive.
in a positive way. And so it did catch me off guard when it said, provoke others to do good deeds. I'm like, now there's a challenge, because you can provoke somebody to fight, to get mad, to a lot of motion that direction, but to use the word provoke. And I think that also shows how much of a challenge it is to use, to provoke somebody to do, to love your enemies as yourself, to provoke them to be the light at work or in their neighborhood. And so I did think that was a good way of making me kind of step back and think of it differently, because of that word use. It's not a positive word in our society typically,
but it
and
does have
especially
energy
now.
behind it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, the elephant in the room in that verse is, don't forsake the assembly.
Right.
That's the elephant in the room right now, right?
Right.
In our current situation. So what do you think about that? How do we keep that instruction of that in today's situation?
I think that is a challenge. I think it's where you want to be respectful and responsible, but again, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So I think you can do precautions, and that's why I appreciate the opportunity that our congregation's in. You know, it's respectfully done and following guidelines, but there is a need. Obviously, what we've talked about, the need to see one another, to interact with one another, and all those relationships will be very hard throughout, you know, everybody to know everybody in the congregation, but people throughout the congregation need to have that person that they can count on, or a group of people that knows them well enough to, you know, to grab them by the arm and be like, we're going to do this, you know, we're still headed in this direction.
There's that encouragement. And that's what I was going to tag on to. There's still at least the call there to be proactive.
Right.
And there's certainly opportunities, even if there is a respect for somebody else, not to be physically present or physically distant, or even maybe care for me to not being physically close. There's still opportunity to pursue, to be proactive from some of the tools we have, many different tools, to at least have that interaction, assemble, so to speak. And we have those opportunities. Even today, even on the web, when you watch the classes that are there, let's say that there's opportunity to participate.
Yeah.
Not everybody chooses to, but you can. So there is that opportunity we have to choose versus maybe we have an excuse not to more easily. It's the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah, it is, and it makes it hard because, I mean, everyone wants to be together, but you obviously don't want to create, you know, a bigger issue and stuff. But,
correct.
And that's why, like I said, for me, it's more of, and you know, not just with the assembly, but you know, we're not guaranteed tomorrow, so you know, do the best I can today, but you know, the importance is, and the pressure is now, and the need is there. So
we've begun to assemble again, right?
Right.
With a lot of good safety measures, and folks have been very respectful and congenial about taking those safety measures when we're together. I can imagine that there's this temptation, now that I've gone 16, 18, 20, or however many weeks it is, and not gone to assembly on Sunday, I'm doing just fine. Do I need to go back? You think that's a realistic question?
I do. I think it goes back to the, you know, human nature of when we talked about earlier with not only the early church, you know, that this letter is written to because of the trials. I mean, obviously theirs would be a bigger challenge, obviously persecution more so than just COVID or just, you know, social distancing or wearing a mask for an hour at a time. But it's still the thought process of human nature is I can do this on my own. You know, I can make this happen. I can go solo. Everything's fine. You know, and until it's not. And so I think it's absolutely, you get in that habit of, you know, not having that routine, not having that interaction that you think, yeah, I'm doing okay. You know, the family's doing good or work's going good for all things considered. So yeah, I can keep doing what I'm doing and maintain status quo. I also think it can also, like we've mentioned before, hurt with, you know, well, Sunday mornings are no longer good for me. You know, I've
right.
found something else. You know, it's going on a hike or playing golf or some other hobby or something. You know, that's appropriate for social distancing and other stuff. But you know, I can do that at this time, and therefore I can, you know, watch the online service at, you know, later in the day or maybe another day. Yeah. So I definitely think it's going to be a challenge for the congregation and for us, you know, moving forward with that, as things, you know, start to, you know, more numbers allowed in the building and those kind of things.
Right. I think it's what your comments, it's a challenge. I'm okay. This has worked out pretty good, right? I still have friends I talk to, and I'm still following the Lord's ways. I'm doing pretty good.
Right.
Is that the beginning of complacency that leads to getting a hard heart? I don't know, but you have to be honest, right?
Right.
Because there's a reason we've been asked to encourage each other. Come along with me on this trek. Stay with it. There's a reason that we've been asked to do that and encourage each other, probably because we're human and we need it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking again about, the first church, it's, technology and other things obviously have changed, but, what applied to them at the very beginning still applies to us today. So it's human nature. It's clearly a problem we as, I guess society, both, people who don't follow Christ and Christians, it's still a problem.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. So
if I'm honest, it's a problem with me anyway.
Right.
Just
not right. It's a problem with you. I mean, right. That if I'm honest with myself.
Right. I get it.
I didn't want to make that seem like
it's fine, bro. I get it.
I was agreeing with that. So.
Tell it like it is. It's okay.
We're in it together.
So we had 2 or 3 questions here. We can talk about these questions.
Sure.
How has the COVID-19 conditions presented temptations to become complacent? Well, we've certainly had some of that conversation back and forth. I guess to add more to that is there is the routine that has its own nudge. Even if I'm just participating in that routine, that has its own reminder. Even if I talk to no one in a particular service, it still has that reminder to me, to nudge me. Where is your conscience, right? When you take the Lord's Supper, we do that every Sunday. It's that nudge. It's that, where's your conscience right now, Bailey? Are you still there, right? You're still alive. You're still committed. You're still in this. There's that routine keeps me going. I just say that, right?
Yeah.
And so the temptations when I don't have that routine is maybe I become less in it. I become less engaged.
Right.
Any thoughts about temptations?
No, I mean, for me, routine is huge, and I mean, I even remember, back during kind of the lockdown, people would talk about not even sure what's today or what's the date or, and that's even, I mean, obviously now a lot of us have work and possibly school, creating more of that schedule routine. So I think that will help. But I think, that a lot, especially during the, late spring, early summer, just getting out of that routine of the first day of the week and, Wednesday and those others, it just kind of was blurring all together and stuff. So I think it's very easy to let the other distractions in or take the place of the assembly.
Another question we had is the book of Hebrews indicates that a person can get to a point of no return in the hardness of their heart. And what are the signs of that turning point? We had some discussion about that already, but what are the signs? What are the signs?
Going back on what we kind of highlighted a little bit, I mean, I think a lot of it is as that person starts to have sin without guilt, it becomes, acceptable. It's the conscience isn't kicking in to say, like, wait a second, I need to step back and examine my behavior. It's once that the sin is just part of every day, then, the heart will just continue to harden. And there's illustrations, through the Bible with at some point that switches over to wickedness because it's not hearing God's voice. It's not allowing the truth to be heard. And at some point, God lets you have your consequences. And so once that wickedness is enough to turn you away, then then God lets that happen.
Mm-hmm. You talk about wickedness. When I was reading chapter 3 of Hebrews, it caught my attention that there's a verse in there about lest you become evil in your ways and fall away from the living God. And what got my attention is living God, and evil means vain or empty. It has no purpose. Those evil ways, that's really the root of that word, is it just has no purpose. And living, and so where I'm coming from is that a person who comes to the point where they don't believe and know the living God who lives forever and with whom they will live forever, that's a different paradigm on making choices, to where the other paradigm is, I'm living on this earth and this is all I got. This is my chance. This is it. This is what I have. So I need to make the best choices I got with what I got, because when it's over, it's over. And that can lead to choices that are more sensual or more physical or more, I need to take more, seeking more comfort or seeking more pleasure, because this is my chance. Right? This is my chance to have that pleasure or that happiness or that joy or that physical opportunity. And if I miss it, I miss it. That's all I got. That frame of mind doesn't have faith in the living God, who knows that he will see you to be alive forever. Right? And so that, it just caught me when I read that verse. The folks that are our example, that were following Moses, lost faith in the fact, hey, this must be all I have. I need to take what I got, what I can. So they make a golden calf. Whereas the ones who believe in the living God can go through that suffering of where that place where they were lacking in food and manna, and then go through that and still know they're going to live whatever they're living now forever, with knowing the living God. So it just caught my attention.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because obviously our world, want you to seize the day, and that you're entitled to what you want when you want it, happiness, and the first thing we do is humans and Christians is, with the trials and suffering, is question God, or wonder, like the early Christians, did I make the right decision? And so it is obviously the easier path is, to take advantage of the day and be happy as much as you can, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's not what we want.
It's not. Yeah. So our last question was, how can we encourage each other in our current conditions? In other words, what are some of the ways we can do that, means or methods or understandings, things that we can see in today's situation, and what are the opportunities we have in our current conditions, right, to give each other courage or to use the opportunities we have. For me, the verses you read, chapter 10, consider, I thought about that word consider, how to spur one another, consider how to provoke, right, that word. Maybe if I'm not having the Sunday morning class that I'm usually part of, maybe I take that hour and then just literally have a pre-worship or a pre-assembly planning time. Who is it that I know that I could do something for, or share a word for, or plan something for, that needs encouragement, right? That needs the positive nudge and the positive pat and say, it's okay, you'll make it, and whatever it is that's needed to stop and think about that. Literally do it instead of think it comes automatic or natural as I run into folks. Actually plan it. That's what I thought about. Maybe I can make a routine of planning it, since I'm not driving 15 minutes back and forth. There's another half hour I saved every Sunday, right? Every Wednesday. I can take that half hour and plan. Do something, right?
Yeah, and some of the things I had thought about is to spur to do things. I mean, obviously it's the opportunity, of you're in your neighborhood, getting to know neighbors more. So it's trying to be that example, trying to be the light. You hopefully can have a conversation with them about Christ, and
So you have more interaction with your neighbors?
Absolutely, yeah. If it's interesting that what the time has given you, because like you said, you're not maybe spending so much time in commute or some of the other things, and because you're not pressed for time because some of the things that have been removed by COVID, that stopping and having a conversation at the mailbox or while I'm mowing the grass, or a lot of us, out walking dogs, stuff like that, maybe you run into people. So I think you have that sense of engagement, plus a desire to probably speak to somebody outside of your own family, to have that interaction. And so that's allowed me to get to know my neighbors better, to maybe have conversations with them that I probably wouldn't, a deeper conversation.
I know for me, I don't have when I would see my neighbor before, I had more pressure of something I needed to do, right? Or needed to go to. There was more pressure.
Yeah.
There seems to be less pressure. So I talk a little longer.
Right. And that talking makes them comfortable enough that, something may come up that can help you relate, on a better level, or see a need that they may have. It's kind of take their, they're going to be out of town. I can do this for them that I hadn't been there to serve them before, or do different things like that, or encourage them. Just, you want to, for what we've talked about, encouraging, for the journey to heaven, but, maybe for them, they just need a little pick me up for, just depressed with, society as far as, COVID and the election year and some of the negativity. They just, a smiling face who generally wants to know how they're doing, not just a, hey, how's it going? Good, great. How are you? Fine. And that's it. I think, that's a great example.
Okay. Anything you want to share in conclusion, and then you can lead us in a prayer.
I was grateful for the topic. I was grateful for the outline just because of everything going on with COVID. Like we've said before, it's more of the negative. And so, and not seeing, the congregation and kind of being away from that, to have this where it's, looking at it and studying it better, it was refreshing to see it and stuff, because it
was for me as well.
Yeah, to have that pickup, because it's all what we're going through right now. Yeah. So the encouragement was good for sure.
It was, for me too.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to lead?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity that you've given for us to meet and to study and talk about your word. And we just pray that the words that we spoke were in accordance with your word and with your will, and just pray that we can all learn from one another, that we can be there for one another, that as we go through these struggles, that it's okay to let somebody in, to let somebody see what we're going through, or to ask for help. We just pray that you'll continue to be with us, continue for us to seek out those who need you and need help, and help us to see the opportunity to serve them and to reach out to them. And just pray as we go forward with COVID, that you be with those who have the ability to make an impact on the virus, and that obviously we can all be safe and get the opportunity to be back with like minds and fellow Christians, brothers and sisters. Again, thank you for this day and the opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.